My father-in-law looked me dead in the eyes and said I should be grateful they let me sleep in their garage. I was holding his grandchild, his own blood, 8 months old, with her daddy's eyes and my stubborn chin. And this man, standing in his $3,000 suit in his perfectly manicured backyard, wanted me to say thank you for a cot next to the lawnmower. My name is Susie O'Connell. I'm 29 years old. And 3 months ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I moved into my in-laws' house after my husband Tyler got deployed to Germany. When Tyler first brought up the idea, it sounded almost reasonable. He was going overseas for 14 months. We had a 5-month-old baby. His parents had that big house with 3 empty bedrooms. His mother, Phyllis, actually cried when she offered. She said she wanted to help. She said family takes care of family. What she didn't mention was that I'd become their unpaid servant, their punching bag, and their personal ATM. I gave up our apartment to save money for our future home. Tyler and I had been married for 2 years, and we were finally getting our feet under us. We had $47,000 in our joint account, enough for a down payment on a starter home when he got back. Then I moved into the Brennan house. You know the type. Big columns out front serving no structural purpose whatsoever. A circular driveway designed purely for showing off. The kind of house that screams, "We have money," while whispering, most of it is credit card debt. But it looked impressive from the outside, which I would learn was the only thing that mattered to the Brennans. The first week was fine. Phyllis showed me to a nice guest room. Gerald helped carry my bags. Brooke, Tyler's older sister, even brought over a casserole. I thought maybe I had been too harsh in my private judgments. By week 2, things shifted. Phyllis mentioned the guest room was actually saved for her sister's visit. Would I mind moving to the space above the garage? Just temporarily, of course. The space turned out to be unfinished storage with a camping cot and a space heater that worked about as well as a birthday candle in a blizzard. I'm pretty sure I could have stored ice cream up there without a freezer, but I told myself it was temporary. Then they took my car. Well, they convinced me to let them keep it safe. Phyllis said the neighborhood had break-ins. She said I didn't need to drive anywhere anyway, since everything was right there at the house. And I, exhausted from sleepless nights with a fussy baby, handed over my keys like an idiot. I haven't driven in 3 months, haven't had access to our bank account either. Gerald got himself added to the account and gave me a weekly allowance of $40. For me and a baby. Have you seen the price of formula lately? I could write a horror novel about diaper costs alone. The expensive diapers that didn't give Lily a rash cost about $28 a box. That left me roughly $12 for food. I started skipping meals so my daughter wouldn't go without. Lost 15 pounds I didn't have to lose. My phone got switched to their family plan too. For convenience, they said. What they didn't mention was they could see everything I did. The one time I tried to email Tyler the truth, Phyllis found it on the family computer and deleted it. Then she took away my laundry privileges as punishment. I spent 2 weeks hand-washing baby clothes like a Victorian washerwoman while my knuckles cracked and bled. 2 weeks ago, Gerald decided the gutters needed cleaning. He decided I should be the one to do it. His exact words were that I needed to earn my keep. So I climbed that rickety ladder, made it about 15 feet up, and the whole thing shifted. I grabbed for the roof, missed, and came down hard on my left ankle. The pain was white hot, like someone drove a nail through my foot. Phyllis heard me scream. She looked at my ankle swelling to the size of a grapefruit and told me to walk it off. No doctor, no ice, just walk it off. So I hobbled around for 2 weeks doing chores on an ankle that turned purple and yellow and made sounds no ankle should make. Through all this, I told no one. My dad, Patrick O'Connell, raised me by himself after my mom left when I was 7. He worked construction his whole life, built houses, built buildings, built me. He taught me to be strong, independent, to never let anyone push me around. And here I was, being pushed into the ground. I couldn't tell him. The shame would have killed me. But last Friday, Dad decided to drive 200 miles to surprise his granddaughter for her unofficial 8-month birthday. He pulled up just as I was limping across the lawn, Lily on my hip, groceries in my other hand. I had walked 2 miles to the store and back because I had no car. My ankle was screaming, and my father saw everything. He watched me struggle up the driveway. Then he asked where my car was. I told him his mom took it, that I was lucky they let me stay. My father's face went through 7 emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, anger, rage, more rage, and finally something that scared me more than all the others. Calm, complete calm, the kind that comes right before a hurricane makes landfall. He opened his truck door and spoke 4 words that changed everything. Get in the car. We're fixing this tonight. I didn't know what that meant, but the look in his eyes told me the Brennans had just made a very serious enemy. And Patrick O'Connell didn't lose fights. Not ever. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. I see every comment and it makes my day. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to what happened. My father drove us to a diner 3 towns over. He said he didn't want anyone reporting back to the Brennans. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. Later, I realized he was being strategic. Everything Dad did from that moment was strategic. The man spent 35 years in union construction. He knew how to deal with bullies. And the Brennans, he told me over coffee, were running one of the oldest cons in the book. I told him everything that night. Every humiliation, every stolen privilege. The words poured out like water from a broken pipe. 3 months of silence, finally breaking free. I told him about Brooke, Tyler's older sister, who visited almost daily. Not to help, never to help. She came to report back to her mother about everything I did wrong. The dishes weren't clean enough. The baby cried too much. I wasn't grateful enough for everything her generous family was doing for poor little me. Brooke never liked me. I came from a working-class family. My father worked with his hands. In Brooke's world, that made me less than. Dad listened without interrupting. When I told him about Phyllis monitoring my emails, his knuckles went white. When I mentioned the latter, I thought he might flip the table, but he just nodded and asked one question. What else haven't you told Tyler? That's when I broke, because I hadn't told Tyler anything. Every video call, his parents were in the room, listening, monitoring. If I tried to text something real, they checked my phone. I was completely cut off from my own husband, but it was worse than that. Phyllis called Tyler regularly on her own phone, gushing about how wonderful everything was, how happy Susie seemed, how grateful I was. She made it sound like I was thriving. And Tyler, stuck on a base 6,000 miles away with limited internet and no reason to doubt his own parents, believed every word. Dad asked about the bank account. I told him Gerald handled everything. I got my $40 on Mondays, and that was all I saw of our money. Dad asked if I still had login access. I said I thought so. I'd never actually tried since moving in. My father smiled then. Not a happy smile. The kind a chess player makes when they see checkmate 3 moves away. He dropped money on the table and said we were going to Kinko's. Kinko's at 11 at night is a strange place. There was a guy in a bathrobe making copies of something I chose not to look at. And there was me, logging into a bank account I hadn't seen in 3 months. The numbers didn't make sense at first. We should have had around $47,000. Tyler's military pay had been depositing automatically. There should have been more by now, not less. But the screen showed $8,200. Nearly $39,000 had vanished. Dad pulled up a chair and said we should look at the transaction history. We printed page after page, and the story they told was ugly. Transfers to BB Holdings, LLC. $15,000 over 3 months. I had no idea what that was until Dad searched and found Brooke's Instagram boutique. She'd been selling healing crystals to gullible women, rocks that looked like they came from a parking lot after a rainstorm. 0 real customers and apparently 0 conscience about where its funding came from. Cash withdrawals every few days, big ones. 500 here, 300 there. The pattern matched Phyllis's lifestyle perfectly. Her twice-weekly salon appointments, her shopping trips to stores I couldn't afford to walk into, her lunches with church ladies where everyone pretended to be humble while comparing designer handbags, marina fees and boat club memberships. Gerald didn't even own a boat, but he liked hanging around people who did, using our money to fund his fantasy life. And then Tyler's credit card, restaurant charges, bar tabs, golf fees, all local, all recent, all impossible for a man stationed in Germany. Gerald had been using his own son's identity while his daughter-in-law starved in his garage. My father said something I'll never forget. He leaned back and said, "I've seen mob accounting that was more subtle than this." He wasn't wrong. The Brennans hadn't even tried to hide it. They were so confident I would never check that they'd left a trail a blind accountant could follow. Dad was already on his phone. He had a friend, a retired paralegal named Maureen Walsh, who owed him a favor. He was calling it in tonight because what the Brennans had done wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. But first, we needed to reach Tyler directly, without his parents listening. Maureen Walsh showed up at Kinko's at midnight in fuzzy pink slippers and a Michigan sweatshirt. She looked like someone's grandmother arriving to bake cookies. She was not there to bake cookies. Within 5 minutes of reviewing our printouts, she'd identified 3 criminal charges the Brennans could face: financial exploitation, fraud, and the big one, identity theft. Using Tyler's credit card without permission wasn't just disgusting. It was a federal crime, and the military takes financial crimes against service members extremely seriously. Maureen said the consequences were significant, prison time significant, but we had a problem. When I first moved in, Phyllis had me sign a stack of paperwork. Insurance forms, she'd called it. Emergency contacts. I'd been exhausted with a 5-month-old who wasn't sleeping. I signed whatever she put in front of me. Who reads paperwork from their mother-in-law? One of those documents was a limited power of attorney giving Gerald authority over financial decisions. That's how he'd gotten added to our account. He had my signature on paper. Never mind, I had no idea what I was signing. Maureen asked if I'd signed willingly with full understanding. Had anyone explained what it was? Had I been given time to read it? No to all 3. She made a note. Fraud can occur when consent is obtained through deception. This might qualify. Dad asked about reaching Tyler directly, without the Brennan filter. Maureen agreed it was critical. If Tyler didn't know what was happening, he needed to hear it from his wife first, not from lawyers or investigators. The problem was how. Tyler had limited internet time on base. Every number I had for him, his parents knew too. If I called through normal channels, Phyllis would find out within hours. That's when Dad pulled out his ancient flip phone. The man refuses to upgrade. Says smartphones are for people who don't have enough to think about. But that night, his stubbornness saved us. He scrolled to a name from decades ago. Sergeant First Class Raymond Booker, an Army buddy who now worked logistics at bases across Europe, including Tyler's base in Germany. Dad made the call right there at Kinko's. It was after 6 in the morning in Germany. They exchanged the kind of greetings old soldiers exchange, brief, profane, and oddly affectionate. Then Dad explained everything. A message would be delivered. Tyler would call a number his parents didn't know. It might take a day, but it would happen. We left Kinko's with a folder full of evidence and something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Tiny and fragile, like a candle in a hurricane, but real. Dad drove us to a motel, not a nice one, the kind where the ice machine has been broken since the Clinton administration. But it was warm, and it wasn't the Brennan house. Lily fell asleep immediately in my arms. Babies sense stress. That night, with my father keeping watch by the window, she slept more peacefully than she had in months. I couldn't sleep, though. I lay there going over the numbers. $15,000 to Brooks' crystal scam, $8,000 in cash for Phyllis, thousands more to Gerald's boat club fantasy, money that was supposed to be our future home, our daughter's security, gone. The call came at 2 in the morning. Unknown number on Dad's flip phone. When I answered, I heard the voice I'd been missing for 3 months. Tyler sounded confused at first. He'd gotten a strange message from someone he didn't know, telling him to call this number urgently. Was everything okay? Was Lily all right? I started crying before I could stop myself. 3 months of holding it together came out in one overwhelming wave, and when I could finally breathe again, I told him everything. When I finished, there was silence. Long enough that I thought the call dropped. Long enough that a terrified part of me wondered if he'd believe his parents over me. Then Tyler spoke. 4 words that put my broken heart back together. "I believe you, Susie." He believed me. without hesitation, without demanding proof, without making excuses for his family. He believed his wife. Tyler had questions, lots of them. Then he told me what he was going to do. First thing in the morning, he was going to his commanding officer. Identity theft against a military spouse was taken seriously. His parents had committed federal crimes, and Tyler intended to make sure they faced consequences. But that wasn't all. His father's 60th birthday party was Sunday. The whole family would be there. Neighbors, business partners, church friends. Everyone the Brennans had spent years impressing with their perfect family image. What if, Tyler asked, he made a surprise video call to wish his father happy birthday? What if that call didn't go the way Gerald expected? I could hear the cold anger in his voice. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about exposure, about ripping away the mask and showing everyone the real monsters underneath. I told Tyler I loved him. He said he loved me too. Then he said something that made me smile for the first time in 3 months. His father was about to have the worst birthday of his life. Saturday morning felt different. The sun came through that cheap motel window like the universe knew the balance was finally shifting. Lily woke up smiling, reaching for my face with her tiny hands, completely unaware her mama was about to go to war. Dad was already awake. I'm not sure he ever slept. He'd spent the night making calls, coordinating what he called the infrastructure of justice. The man had spent 35 years building things. Now he was building something different. The Brennans had no idea what they'd awakened when they messed with Patrick O'Connell's daughter. Tyler had been busy too. He called around 6 in the morning, right after meeting with his commanding officer. The military does not appreciate identity theft against service members. Tyler's CO listened to the whole story with a face like thunder, then connected him with JAG immediately. Within hours, Tyler had filed formal reports about the credit card fraud and unauthorized account access. The wheels of military justice were turning, and once they start, they're very hard to stop. First thing Tyler did was freeze every account, the joint savings, the checking, his credit card, everything. Gerald would find out soon enough when his next restaurant swipe got declined in front of his golf buddies. But by then it would be too late. No more transfers to Brooke's Crystal Pyramid scheme. No more cash for Phyllis's shopping addiction. No more boat club memberships for Gerald's fantasy life. The bleeding had finally stopped. But freezing accounts was just the beginning. Tyler wanted accountability, and he had a plan to get it. His father's 60th birthday party was tomorrow, Sunday. The whole extended Brennan clan would be there. Neighbors from the fancy houses nearby, business partners in expensive casual wear, church friends with covered dishes. Everyone the Brennans had spent years impressing with their perfect family image. Tyler wanted to burn that image to the ground in front of all of them. The video call was my idea. I told Tyler I'd suggest it to Phyllis as a surprise. She'd absolutely love having her military son beam in from Germany to honor his father publicly. She'd set up the big TV in the living room, gather all the guests for the touching moment, probably buy a ring light for perfect video quality, record everything for memories. She'd think of everything, except what Tyler was actually going to say. Maureen came by the motel around noon with updates. Her detective friend Sullivan, who'd worked financial crimes for 20 years before retiring, had reviewed our evidence informally. He said there was more than enough for a formal investigation. The power of attorney obtained through deception, the unauthorized withdrawals, the identity theft. These weren't small violations. These were felonies. Sullivan couldn't make arrests based on an informal review, but he could do something almost as valuable. He could show up at the party, ask questions, make the Brennans very nervous in front of everyone they'd spent years impressing. The formal investigation would take time, but the questioning could happen immediately. And having a detective appear at Gerald's 60th birthday, badge visible, asking about financial irregularities, that would send a message louder than any arrest warrant. Dad coordinated the timing. Sullivan would arrive about 30 minutes into Tyler's video call, just when the truth was sinking in, just when Gerald and Phyllis were scrambling for explanations. Dad even practiced his innocent face in the motel mirror that afternoon. He kept asking if he looked trustworthy, like a friendly grandfather just there to support his daughter, not a man about to dismantle someone's entire reputation. I told him he looked perfect. He said I was a terrible liar, but he appreciated the effort. I had to go back to that house, face Phyllis, pretend nothing had changed, play the grateful daughter-in-law for one more day. The thought made my skin crawl, but if they suspected anything, they might cancel the party. They might destroy evidence. I needed them comfortable, confident, completely unprepared. Dad drove me back around 4 o'clock. Before I got out, I texted him exactly where I'd hidden my packed bag in the garage, behind the old paint cans on the metal shelf near the lawn equipment. He'd grab it tomorrow while everyone was distracted by the party. Walking back into that house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Phyllis met me at the door with her usual tight smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. She asked where I'd been. I told her my father wanted some grandfather-granddaughter bonding time. She seemed annoyed I'd left without asking permission, but had too much party preparation on her mind to push it. I waited until she was arranging centerpieces before making my move. I mentioned that Tyler had called my dad's phone since mine was acting up. He wanted to surprise his father with a video call during the party. Wished Gerald happy 60th in front of all the guests. You should have seen Phyllis light up. For a moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. She immediately started planning. The big TV in the living room, right after the cake cutting. She'd make sure everyone gathered. She'd even bought a ring light last month that would be perfect. It would be so special, she kept saying. I smiled and agreed. Oh yes, I said. It would definitely be something to remember. By the way, if this story is hitting close to home, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Your support helps me keep telling these stories. And trust me, what happens at that birthday party is something you don't want to miss. Sunday morning arrived gorgeous. Blue skies, light breeze, perfect temperature. Gerald's birthday couldn't have asked for better weather. The catering arrived early. The tent went up in the backyard. Flowers decorated every surface. It looked more like a wedding than a birthday. But Gerald never did anything small. Phyllis handed me a list at 8 o'clock. 37 tasks to complete before guests arrived. She spoke to me like hired help. Actually, less than hired help. At least hired help gets paid. I completed every task perfectly. Model daughter-in-law. Invisible. The guests started arriving around too. Business partners. Neighbors with expensive wine. Church friends with covered dishes. Brooke made her entrance in an outfit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, air-kissing her parents like she hadn't seen them 2 days ago. I watched them all. These people who smiled at me at Christmas while I starved in their friend's garage. These people who believed Phyllis's lies about my mental health. In a few hours, they would know everything. Gerald held court in the backyard, accepting compliments on the party, the house, his successful life. He looked so confident, so secure at the center of his perfect world. I wondered if he'd recognize this moment later as the last time he was ever truly happy. At 4 o'clock, Phyllis announced it was time for the video call. Everyone should gather in the living room. Her military son was calling from Germany to wish his father happy birthday. This was going to be so special. She was right about that. 53 people crowded into the living room. I counted them. Counting gave me something to focus on besides my pounding heart. Business partners positioned up front, eager to be seen. Church ladies clustered by the couch. Neighbors filled the gaps. Gerald stood center stage, champagne raised, beaming like a man about to receive a medal he actually deserved. Phyllis connected the call with a flourish. The TV filled with Tyler's face. He wore his dress uniform, looking every inch the proud military son. The room burst into applause. Someone whistled. Gerald raised his glass higher toward the screen. Tyler smiled, but something was off about that smile, something cold underneath the warmth. I was probably the only one who noticed. I knew what was coming. "Happy birthday, Dad," Tyler said. His voice was calm, controlled. "I'm glad everyone could be here, because I have some things I need to say." The room settled into expectant silence. Everyone anticipated a heartfelt tribute, a son praising his wonderful father. That's not what happened. Tyler started with the money. He spoke clearly, without emotion, laying out facts like a prosecutor. $47,000. That's what he and his wife had saved for their future, for their first home, for their daughter's security. $8,200. That's what was left. Someone in this room stole almost $39,000 from his family while he served his country overseas. The room went completely silent. Gerald's smile froze on his face. Phyllis looked like she'd swallowed something rotten. $15,000 went to BB Holdings, LLC, Tyler continued. That's Brooke's company, Dad. The one selling crystals on Instagram, the one that apparently needed my money to survive. Every head in the room swiveled toward Brooke. She'd gone pale under her expensive makeup. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish yanked out of water. She looked at her parents for rescue. None came. $8,000 in cash withdrawals, Tyler said, matching Mom's spending habits perfectly, her salon appointments, her shopping trips, her lunches with all you lovely church ladies. The church ladies shifted uncomfortably. A few looked appalled. Most just looked fascinated, the way people can't look away from car accidents. Gerald's business partners were exchanging glances, doing mental math. If he'd steal from his own son, what might he do to them? But Tyler wasn't finished. There's also my credit card, the one I've never given anyone permission to use. Someone's been charging restaurant meals, golf fees, bar tabs, all local, all while I've been stationed in Germany. His eyes found Gerald through the camera. Dad, want to explain how that's possible? Gerald's face had transformed, confident to confused to angry to something I'd never seen before. Fear, real fear. His mouth opened, probably to spin some lie. He never got the chance. The doorbell rang. Phyllis, operating on Hostess autopilot, answered it. Detective Sullivan stood on the porch, badge visible. He apologized for interrupting the party, said he was following up on a report of financial irregularities. He had questions for Gerald and Phyllis. It would only take a few minutes, unless they'd prefer continuing this conversation at the station. The room erupted. Gerald's business partners suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Church ladies whispered frantically. Neighbors backed toward exits, not wanting their names associated with whatever was happening. But everyone froze when Tyler's voice cut through. I'm not finished. 53 people stopped moving. The detective stood in the doorway watching. Tyler told them about me. The garage, the cot next to the lawnmower, the $40 that was supposed to feed 2 people. The car taken away, the phone monitored, the emails deleted. He told them about the ladder and my ankle, about being told to walk off an injury that might have been a fracture. And he told them about the lies, the stories Phyllis spread about my mental health, the whispers that I was unstable, couldn't be trusted with my own baby, the campaign designed to destroy my reputation, so if I ever spoke up, nobody would believe me. I watched faces change around the room. Church ladies who'd believed Phyllis, who'd probably spread those stories themselves, looked sick. Neighbors who'd seen me limping and never offered help couldn't meet my eyes. They'd all been fooled. They'd all played their part without knowing it. Phyllis tried to interrupt, called it lies, misunderstandings, a troubled girl making up stories, but her voice was shaking. Her perfect composure was cracking. Nobody looked at her with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her like they'd never really seen her before. Gerald tried another approach, turned to his business partners, called it a family matter that got out of hand, said they could work it out privately. One partner, a silver-haired man named William, asked a simple question. Did you use your son's credit card, Gerald? Gerald didn't answer. His silence said everything. Detective Sullivan suggested Gerald and Phyllis come to the station voluntarily, answer some questions, clear up these misunderstandings. Tyler spoke one last time. He looked at me through the camera. Susie, take our daughter and go with your father. I'll be home as soon as I can. I love you both. Then he looked at his parents, the people who raised him, the people who'd stolen from him and abused his wife and lied to his face for 3 months. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't wish his father happy birthday. He just ended the call. The screen went black, and Gerald's perfect world went black with it. I walked to the door where Dad was waiting. He had my bag from behind the paint cans. Lily's car seat was ready in his truck. Phyllis grabbed my arm as I passed. Her nails dug into my skin. She hissed that I'd regret this, that she had lawyers, connections, people who owed her favors. I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. This woman who'd made my life a nightmare for 3 months, who'd smiled while stealing my money and starving me and freezing me and isolating me from everyone who loved me. I smiled at her. A real smile. The first genuine one I'd worn in that house. Then I said 5 words I'd dreamed about for months. I'm not scared of you. I pulled free and walked into the sunshine. Behind me, Sullivan was beginning his questions. Gerald was stammering. Phyllis's voice was rising in panic as everything crumbled around her. I didn't look back. Not once. I climbed into Dad's truck, buckled Lily in, and watched the Brennan house disappear in the mirror. The sun was setting, orange and pink streaking across the sky like the world was celebrating with me. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and phone calls, but for the first time in months, every update brought another small victory. Gerald and Phyllis were formally charged 10 days after the party. Financial exploitation, fraud, identity theft. The prosecutor added more charges once investigators really started digging. Turns out Gerald had been skimming from his business partners for years, too. Smaller amounts, harder to detect, but they added up. By the time everything was tallied, he was facing both state and federal charges. His lawyer told him to prepare for significant prison time. Phyllis tried playing victim, told anyone who'd listen that she had no idea about the financial crimes. Nobody bought it. The evidence showed she'd been an active participant in everything. The cash withdrawals matched her shopping trips. The communication monitoring was her project. The lies about my mental health were her creation. She was facing her own charges now. Brooke's situation was almost funny. Her Instagram boutique had never been properly registered with the state. She'd never paid taxes on the $15,000 she took from our account. When investigators looked into her business, they found a mess of violations. Her influencer dreams died the day the state tax authority sent her a letter demanding back payments plus penalties. Last I heard, she'd moved back in with her parents, the same parents facing criminal charges, the same house likely to be seized. Sometimes karma has a sense of humor. Tyler got emergency leave 3 weeks after the party. When he walked through my father's door and saw me and Lily waiting, he broke down. This man who'd held it together through combat training and overseas deployment finally let himself cry. We stood there wrapped together, the 3 of us, and I knew we were going to be okay, different than before, changed by what we'd been through, but okay. I learned something important through all this. My dad always said to keep your own emergency fund. Money nobody else can touch. I wish I'd listened better. From now on, I'll always have savings in just my name. No shared accounts without clear boundaries. No signing documents without reading every word. You never know who might betray that trust. The community reaction surprised me. I expected people to take sides. Instead, I got casseroles, cards, phone calls from church ladies apologizing for believing Phyllis's lies. One neighbor came by with homemade pie and tears in her eyes, saying she'd seen me limping that day and almost offered help, but decided not to interfere. She'd been haunted by that decision. I told her it wasn't her fault. The Brennans fooled everyone. The house went up for sale 2 months later. Gerald needed cash for lawyers. I drove by once. The for sale sign looked wrong in front of those pretentious columns. The grass was overgrown, the gardens choked with weeds. The house that was my prison was becoming a shell. I didn't feel satisfaction, just closure. Tyler came home permanently in early spring. He'd been transferred to a base 2 hours from Dad's place. We started looking at houses again, smaller than we'd planned, but ours. No in-laws with keys, no shared accounts with family, no power of attorney ever again. The last time I saw Phyllis was at a court hearing. She looked smaller than I remembered. The church lady mask was gone, replaced by something raw and scared. She tried to catch my eye. I looked right through her like she wasn't there. She doesn't get my attention anymore. She doesn't get anything from me ever again. Walking out of that courthouse, I held my husband's hand on one side and my father's on the other. Lily babbled happily in her carrier, unaware of everything. She'll know this story someday. I'll tell her that her mother was brave even when she didn't feel brave, that her grandfather drove 200 miles because something felt wrong, that her father believed his wife when it mattered most. And I'll tell her the most important lesson. You don't need permission to stand up for yourself. You don't need approval to demand respect. Anyone who tries to take your dignity doesn't deserve a place in your life. Not even family, especially not family who would hurt you. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. The Brennans made that mistake. They thought because I was polite, because I didn't fight back immediately, they could do whatever they wanted. They learned the hard way. When you mess with an O'Connell, you better be ready for the consequences. Family protects family, always. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story.